Your credit score was perfect, but you weren't even using it, my sister told me, laughing. The words almost broke me. What she didn't know was that our father left me something more powerful, an integrity clause in his will that would cost her everything. My name is Linda, and this story begins where most family stories are supposed to end, at the Thanksgiving dinner table. But this wasn't about giving thanks, it was about taking everything back. Imagine this. A perfectly roasted turkey, the scent of cinnamon and pumpkin in the air, and the smiling faces of the people who are supposed to love you most. Now, imagine reaching into your purse, pulling out a folder marked Confidential, FBI Financial Crimes Division, and sliding it across the table to your baby sister. The smile on her face didn't just fade, it shattered. She thought she'd only stolen my identity for a $500,000 mortgage on a beach house. A simple, dirty little secret. She had no idea I knew everything. I wasn't just there to reclaim my name. I was there to dismantle the lie her entire life was built on, a lie funded by a $200 million family trust she was systematically draining behind everyone's back. She thought she was untouchable, protected by our mother's love and my silence, but my silence had run out. If you've ever felt like your kindness was mistaken for weakness, just give this video a like so I know I'm not alone, and let me tell you how we got to this point. It's a hell of a story, one of the darkest family revenge stories you'll ever hear. And it all started with a single phone call. Before I tell you about that phone call, the one that blew my quiet, orderly life to pieces, let me paint you a picture of the woman you're listening to. For 35 years, I've been the responsible one. The reliable one. The one who believed in hard work over handouts. While my sister chased glamour, I chased stability. I live in Baltimore, Maryland, in a charming but modest row house in Federal Hill that I saved for 10 years to buy. Every brick in that house was paid for with overtime hours at my construction project management job, with weekends spent budgeting instead of brunching. My world was built on tangible things, a perfect 810 credit score I monitored like a hawk, a 401. I started with my very first paycheck, and the quiet pride of knowing I owed nothing to anyone. My father, a self-made real estate developer, was my hero. He taught me that your name is the only thing you truly own. He'd say, Linda, integrity is the foundation you build your life on. Without it, everything else is just sand. He built an empire from nothing, and I was content building my own small, sturdy world in his shadow, honoring his legacy through my own discipline. I thought that was enough. I thought my quiet strength was seen, was valued. I was so wrong. If you've ever felt like the forgotten one in your family, the quiet engine that keeps everything running without any of the applause, just type the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this silent strength reaches. My father's legacy wasn't just an idea. It was a responsibility handed to me, a weight I was proud to carry. When he passed, he made me the executor of his estate, a trust valued at over $200 million. He trusted me to manage it, to ensure it was a tool for security and opportunity, not a treasure chest to be plundered. I took that duty as sacred. I spent my nights reviewing financial statements, my weekends consulting with our family's longtime advisor, making sure every dollar was accounted for, every investment sound. It was my way of continuing his life's work. My life in Baltimore was a reflection of that ethos. While tourists flocked to the inner harbor, I found my peace in the quiet, cobblestone streets of Fells Point, sipping coffee and reading blueprints. My satisfaction didn't come from a like on an Instagram post. It came from the feeling of accomplishment when a skyscraper I managed scraped the Maryland sky for the first time. It was real. It was tangible. I drove a reliable 10-year-old Toyota, not because I couldn't afford more, but because it was paid off. My joy was in my independence, in the knowledge that the solid ground beneath my feet was ground I had paved myself. I saw this diligence not as a sacrifice, but as a source of immense strength. I believed my sister, despite her different path, saw and respected it too. I thought the foundation of family was unshakable. I learned the hard way that some people see a strong foundation not as something to build upon, but as something to dynamite from underneath. While I was building a life, my sister Cheryl was building a brand. And that brand was expensive. From the time we were kids, Cheryl had a kind of dazzling charisma that made people want to give her things. Where I was quiet and diligent, she was a supernova of charm and drama. Our mother, Betty, was her biggest fan. I'll never forget the phrase she used my whole life. Linda is my rock. She's strong, she can handle anything. But Cheryl is my star. And stars need to shine. That single sentence defined our entire existence. It meant my achievements were expected, and my struggles were meant to be handled silently. It meant Cheryl's failures were romanticized, her debts were just temporary setbacks, and her irresponsibility was simply a creative spirit that can't be tied down. When she dropped out of NYU after one semester, it was because the city stifled her, not because she failed 3 classes. When she moved back home for the 3rd time at age 27, it was to recharge her artistic batteries. My mother paid for it all, convinced she was nurturing a future icon. This is why, when Cheryl announced she was moving to Palm Beach, into a waterfront mansion, no less, a part of me wasn't even surprised. It was just the next act in her lifelong performance of unearned success. The family narrative was set in stone. Cheryl was destined for greatness, and I was destined to applaud from the sidelines. Let me know, were you ever the scapegoat too? Type rock if you were always the fixer. Or star if you were always the golden child. I really want to see the balance in the comments below. Her move to Palm Beach wasn't just a change of address, it was like she'd been recast in a different movie. Her Instagram feed, once a collection of selfies and brunch photos, transformed into a highlight reel of staggering wealth. One day, she was posing with a new Birkin bag on the deck of a yacht. The next, she was stepping out of a vintage Rolls-Royce in front of some exclusive club on Worth Avenue. And then there was the house. It was a sprawling, white stucco mansion right on the Intracoastal Waterway, with a private dock and a pool that looked like something out of a resort brochure. The explanation for this sudden Midas touch was always the same: a mysterious, wildly successful fiancé named Stephen. According to Cheryl, Stephen was an international financier, a phantom figure who was always conveniently closing a deal in Singapore or scouting investments in Dubai. He was never available for a phone call, never seen in a single photo. I remember calling her one evening, my practical, builder brain, unable to compute. "Cheryl, it's incredible," I started, "but how are you handling the upkeep? The taxes alone on a property like that must be 6 figures." She laughed, a breezy, dismissive sound that made me feel small. "Oh, Linda, you and your numbers. Stephen takes care of all the boring details. Honestly, you wouldn't understand the scale we're operating on now." Her condescension was a slap in the face. It was designed to shut me down, to make my legitimate questions seem petty and jealous. And shamefully, for a little while, it worked. The call that ignited the fire came on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning in October. I was in my office in downtown Baltimore, a mug of lukewarm coffee on my desk, surrounded by blueprints for a new high-rise. My world was orderly, predictable, and entirely under my control. The phone buzzed an unfamiliar number with a 561 area code. Palm Beach. I almost swiped to ignore, assuming it was a spam call, but some professional instinct made me answer. "This is Linda Walsh." A crisp, professional female voice on the other end replied, "Good morning, am I speaking with Mrs. Linda Walsh?" I corrected her automatically. "It's Miss Walsh." A small pause. "Of course. Miss Walsh, my name is Janine, and I'm calling from Palm Key Financial regarding the mortgage on your property at 12 Ocean View Drive in Palm Beach. Your account is now 60 days past due." I actually laughed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "I'm sorry, you definitely have the wrong person. I live in Baltimore. I don't own property in Florida." Janine's voice remained calm, which made her next words even more terrifying. "Ma'am, according to our records, you took out a mortgage for $568,000 7 months ago. The application was processed using your social security number, employment history, and a copy of your driver's license." My blood ran cold. The blueprints on my desk blurred into meaningless lines. The distant sound of traffic outside my window faded to a dull roar. That number, it wasn't random. It was the exact 20% down payment required for a house in that price range. The house Cheryl was living in. It wasn't Stephen. There was no Stephen. There was only my sister, a forged signature, and a $500,000 anchor tied around my neck. For about 10 minutes after that call, I couldn't move. I just sat at my desk, the world tilting on its axis. But the paralysis didn't last. The shock and the hurt were quickly burned away by something else, something cold and hard as steel. Rage. My father didn't raise a victim. He raised a fighter. Before I even left my office, I was on my computer. I placed fraud alerts and a full credit freeze with all three bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Then I paid for my full credit reports, and the screen lit up with the true scale of the nightmare. It wasn't just the mortgage. There were 3 new high-limit credit cards: an American Express Platinum card, a Saks Fifth Avenue card, a Visa with a $20,000 limit. All opened in my name. All maxed out on designer clothes, spa treatments, and things I couldn't even identify. My perfect 810 credit score, my decade of discipline, had been systematically dismantled. It was now a catastrophic 520. I knew this was beyond me. The next morning, I wasn't just on the phone with a lawyer, I was in the office of the best financial fraud attorney in the state of Maryland. I laid out everything in a neat folder. He looked at me, his expression grim. "Linda," he said, "family fraud cases are the worst. The perpetrators rely on one thing, that you won't have the stomach to press charges against your own blood." He looked at me, waiting for me to break, to cry, to back down. He was asking me to make an impossible choice: protect my family's name or protect my future. If you've ever been forced to draw a line in the sand with the people you love, subscribe and join a community that understands that strength sometimes means walking away. I looked my lawyer dead in the eye and said, "She stopped being my sister when she decided to sign my name. Do whatever it takes." My lawyer advised me to let the legal process play out, to keep my distance. But I couldn't. I needed to see it for myself. I needed to stand inside the crime scene that was my sister's life and look her in the eye as her world of lies came crashing down. I booked the first flight to Palm Beach the next morning. Driving the rental car from the airport down the opulent, sun-drenched boulevards felt surreal. Every manicured lawn, every gleaming Bentley that glided past felt like a personal insult, paid for with my stolen security. When I pulled up to the house, it was even more obscenely grand in person. I didn't ring the doorbell. I pounded on the heavy oak door with my fist. Cheryl opened it, dressed in a silk lounge set, a half-surprised, half-annoyed look on her face that instantly turned to ice when she saw me. "Linda? What on earth are you doing here?" I pushed past her into the marble entryway. "I think you know exactly what I'm doing here, Cheryl. We need to talk about my mortgage. The one from Palm Key Financial. Loan number 74321. I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. She tried to bluff. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Stephen handled all of that." I just stared at her, my silence more powerful than any scream. Finally, her composure cracked. "Okay, fine," she snapped, her voice turning venomous. "I used your name. It was an investment. This house has already gone up $500,000 in value. I was making money for us. It's not like you were using your perfect credit for anything important anyway. I gave it a purpose." I just looked at her, the sister I once knew completely gone, replaced by this stranger. "The only purpose you gave it, Cheryl, is Exhibit A in a federal fraud investigation. I hope it was worth it." Flying back from that empty mansion in Palm Beach, I felt a grim sense of clarity. The sister I knew was a ghost. The woman living in that house was a stranger and a criminal. I went straight back to my legal team, armed with the confirmation they needed. But my lawyer, a sharp man named Mr. Harrison, pointed out something that still bothered him. "The mortgage is sloppy, but the money trail for the down payment is not," he said, tapping a stack of papers. "Your sister isn't sophisticated enough to move over $500,000 from a secured trust without tripping a dozen alarms. Someone helped her. Someone with access and knowledge." That's when we unleashed the private investigator. For 2 weeks, he dug into the intricate finances of my father's estate. And then he found it. The money hadn't come in one lump sum. It had been siphoned off over a year in a series of 32 separate withdrawals, each one just small enough to not require my secondary sign-off as executor. The funds were routed through a shell corporation before being wired to the bank in Florida. It was a professional job, and every single transfer was authorized by one man, Mr. Henderson, our family's financial advisor for over 30 years. The man who eulogized my father at his funeral. The man who had patted my hand and told me, "Don't you worry, Linda, I'll help you protect his legacy." The betrayal was so profound, it felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath me all over again. It's one thing to be stabbed in the back by a sister you know is troubled, but what do you do when the knife is held by the person who was supposed to be guarding your back? If you've ever been betrayed by a mentor or a trusted family friend, someone who was supposed to protect you, let's see a producter in the comments. This wasn't just identity theft anymore. This was a full-blown conspiracy. Armed with this devastating truth, my path forward became crystal clear. This wasn't a secret to be handled in the sterile silence of a lawyer's office. This was a sickness that needed to be exposed to the light. I knew the perfect operating table, my mother's Thanksgiving dinner. I flew home to Baltimore and walked into that familiar house, the scent of roast turkey and nostalgia thick in the air. My mother, Betty, hugged me, her embrace feeling hollow. My Uncle Walter gave me a concerned look. And then there was Cheryl, flown in from her palace of lies, regaling everyone with tales of the Palm Beach charity circuit. She was radiant, condescending, and completely oblivious. I played my part through the entire meal. I passed the mashed potatoes, complimented the stuffing, and let her dominate the conversation. I let her build her fantasy world as high as she possibly could, right there in the heart of our family. Then, just as my mother brought out the pumpkin pie, I cleared my throat. The room quieted. "Before we have dessert," I said, my voice even and calm, "I have something I'd like to share." I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the center of the table. "Cheryl, maybe you can start by explaining this." It was a copy of the fraudulent mortgage. My mother immediately started. "Linda, this is not the time," but I cut her off, placing a second, much thicker stack of papers next to the first. "You're right, Mom. Let's talk about these, instead." 32 illegal wire transfers, authorized by Mr. Henderson, siphoning money from Dad's trust. Cheryl's face went white. Then, I placed the final folder on the table, the one with the official seal. My lawyers found this so interesting, they shared it with the FBI. They send their regards. The silence that followed the word FBI was so heavy, I could feel it pressing on my chest. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock that had measured our entire childhoods. Cheryl finally broke the silence, not with tears, but with a venomous laugh that was pure poison. You actually did it," she hissed, her eyes blazing with a hatred I had never seen before. "You couldn't just stand to see me have something, could you? Dad always made you the saint, the responsible one. He put you in charge of everything because he thought I would fail. I was just taking what he should have given me freely. I deserved that life." My mother jumped to her feet, her face a mask of fury, but it was all directed at me. "Linda Marie, how could you?" she cried, her voice trembling. "You bring this filth to my Thanksgiving table? You call the police on your own sister? You are trying to destroy this family." It was then that I saw the truth with sickening clarity. To my mother, the crime wasn't the theft, the fraud, or the profound betrayal. The crime was my refusal to be a silent victim. The crime was exposing the rot that she had so carefully covered up for years. Have you ever been in a position where you were punished not for doing something wrong, but for finally telling the truth about someone else's wrongdoing? If you know what it feels like to be the family truth teller, the one who has to bear the weight of reality, just type the word truth in the comments. My Uncle Walter finally spoke, his voice low and heavy with disgust. "Betty, be quiet. For once, just be quiet. Your daughter isn't destroying this family. She's the only one who ever tried to save it." The Thanksgiving dinner wasn't an ending, it was the beginning of the avalanche. Once the FBI took over, the story was no longer mine to tell. It belonged to the U.S. Attorney's Office. 2 weeks later, the consequences arrived. On a sunny Florida morning, federal agents walked up the marble steps of the Palm Beach mansion and arrested Cheryl. There was no drama, no shouting, just the quiet, irreversible click of handcuffs. That same morning, 3 states away in Baltimore, another team of agents entered the mahogany-paneled offices of Henderson and Associates and escorted a stunned Mr. Henderson from his desk in front of his entire firm. The charges were staggering. Multiple counts of wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, and aggravated identity theft. The evidence I had gathered, combined with the FBI's investigation, created an ironclad case. They were facing decades in prison. Faced with a mountain of irrefutable proof, they both took plea deals. Mr. Henderson, as an officer of the court and a fiduciary who had committed the ultimate breach of trust, was made an example of. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison, stripped of his licenses, and forced to pay millions in restitution. Cheryl, for her cooperation, received a sentence of 5 years. My mother, lost in a world of denial, mortgaged her own home to pay for Cheryl's high-powered defense attorneys, still calling her daughter's calculated crimes a misunderstanding. I attended every court date. Watching my sister, stripped of her designer clothes and her arrogant smirk, finally face the music. I didn't feel the victory I expected. I just felt a profound, heavy quiet. The storm had passed. With the trials over, I thought my only remaining job was the long, grueling process of recovery. My days were filled with calls to credit bureaus and meetings with my estate lawyer, painstakingly untangling the web of debt and fraud my sister had woven. I assumed the story was over, that all that was left was the cleanup. But my father had one last card to play, one final piece of wisdom delivered from beyond the grave. About a month after Cheryl's sentencing, my lawyer, Mr. Harrison, called me into his office. He had a single, crisp document laid out on his mahogany desk. "Linda," he said, his voice holding a note of reverence. "I've been practicing estate law for 40 years, and I've never seen anything quite like this. Your father was an exceptionally shrewd man." He pointed to a section deep within the $300 million trust agreement. It was titled, The Integrity Clause. The language was simple but devastatingly precise. It stated that if any beneficiary of the trust was convicted of a felony crime, specifically any crime related to fraud or financial misconduct that brought public dishonor to the family name, that beneficiary's inheritance rights would be immediately and irrevocably terminated. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't blind faith. My father had seen. He had known the potential for trouble, the character flaw in his youngest daughter, and he had built a final, silent firewall to protect his life's work. He had protected me. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? About the wisdom our parents have that we don't see until much later. If you've ever had a moment where you realized a parent understood you more than you ever knew, tell me about it in the comments. I'd love to read them. Mr. Harrison looked at me. "The clause is ironclad, Linda." Her conviction triggered it. "She is legally disinherited. The entire estate is now under your sole control." Sitting in my lawyer's office, with the legal right to a fortune I could never spend in 10 lifetimes, I felt the full weight of my father's trust. I could have bought my own mansion in Palm Beach, a dozen of them if I wanted. I could have disappeared onto a yacht and sailed the world. But all I could think about was the look on my sister's face when she justified her crimes, the empty, desperate need for a life of glittering surfaces. She thought our father's legacy was about money, about the things money could buy. She was wrong. His legacy was about the act of building itself. He started his company with a single-use truck and a $2,000 loan. He built homes, not just as investments, but as places where families could build their lives. That was his truth. And I realized in that moment that the ultimate revenge, the ultimate victory, wasn't in punishing my sister further. It was in proving her vision of our family's worth utterly and completely wrong. The following month, after settling all the fraudulent debts and securing my own future, I made my decision. I chartered the Walsh Family Trust, and its first act was a foundational grant of $150 million to establish a new nonprofit organization right here in Baltimore. The Walsh Foundation for Community Development. Its mission is simple: to fund affordable housing projects and provide trade school scholarships for the next generation of builders. My sister tried to use our father's money to buy a hollow fantasy. I decided to use it to build a tangible reality for thousands of people. She tried to steal his money, but I was going to reclaim his legacy. The creation of the foundation was my public answer to the betrayal. The private healing, as these things always are, was a much quieter and more complicated journey. It's been 2 years since the sentencing. Cheryl is serving her time in a low-security federal facility. She writes me letters, filled with apologies that I'm still not sure are genuine remorse or just well-rehearsed regret. I read them, and I feel a distant, sad pity, but the volcanic anger is gone. The power she had over me, the power to hurt and disappoint, has vanished. She is simply a chapter of my life that is now closed. My relationship with my mother is the quietest tragedy in all of this. We speak on holidays and birthdays, our conversations polite and painfully shallow. She will never truly understand, and I've learned to stop needing her to. I've had to grieve the loss of a sister I thought I had, and also grieve the loss of a mother I wished I'd had. My Uncle Walter, however, has become more like a father to me than ever, a constant source of quiet strength and unwavering support. As for me, I'm still in my row house in Baltimore. I still manage construction sites, finding peace in the organized chaos of a building rising from the ground. The money hasn't changed who I am, but the experience has. I learned that family isn't an unconditional obligation to absorb unlimited dysfunction. Real love requires boundaries, and sometimes the most loving act is to step back and let someone finally face the consequences you've always protected them from. What I've come to understand is that justice isn't always a thunderous clap of divine retribution. Sometimes, it's a quiet, internal realignment. It's the moment you stop waiting for an apology you'll never receive and instead give yourself permission to heal. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't about absolving the person who hurt you. It has nothing to do with them. It's about taking the knife they stuck in your back, pulling it out, and letting the wound finally close on your own terms. You stop letting their actions define your reactions. The payback for their betrayal isn't seeing them suffer, it's seeing yourself thrive, not in spite of what they did, but because of the strength you discovered in the aftermath. My family's story is a dark one, a cautionary tale of greed and broken trust. But my story, the one I am living now, is one of resilience. It's a testament to the fact that you can come from a place of profound dysfunction and still choose to build a life of purpose and integrity. The most powerful form of revenge is to refuse to be destroyed. It's to take the rubble of what they tried to tear down and use it to build a foundation for something better, something stronger, something they can never touch. And if this story has resonated with you, if you believe in the power of rewriting your own ending, then please share this video with someone who needs to hear that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's essential. Subscribe to join our community of survivors, builders, and truth tellers. Thank you for listening.